Yeah. Finally, holy cow. I got it now. Finally trying to get this box apart. And I guess that's the beauty of the interlocking dovetail. If you look at the way I put this together, when I tapped this down the last time, I was trying to take it apart this way, but the dovetail, because of its design, doesn't allow me to pop it out from the front. It has to come out from the side. So for the last 6 days that I've been working on this, I couldn't get the thing apart. I went on YouTube, I checked a couple of people who were experts in dovetails. Nobody told me that it'll pop apart sideways, but it won't come across from the front. So I finally got the thing together. So now I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is going to be kind of putting a bottom on this. Because remember I talked about the last time that if I put all these dovetails together and there's nothing on the bottom, if I put my keys or a tape measure or my wife puts jewelry on the inside of the box, then the keys or the jewelry or the tape measure just stay there, because when I lift up the box, there's no bottom. So I have to add a bottom to this. But as I've always said, the thinking's the hard part. And from years of experience, I know for a fact that I can't mark this thing enough. In other words, when I put this together and I cut the dovetails on the dovetail jig, what I said to you, there was about 6 or 7 things you had to do. One of them was to label that box, or that drawer, if you will, because that's what it turned into. Label it left front, both parts, the side and the front, were both the left fronts. And then I had to label it left rear, right rear, right front. So I took care of all those corners. So they were labeled exactly where they had to be, where they're going to align up. The thing that's very interesting about that was after I cut that, the markings on a lot of these dovetails kind of disappeared. Because when I used my router and I routed it, a lot of that kind of just, I can't follow and I can't see what goes where. So what I did was, when I put this together the last time we met, I tapped them together. What I did was I actually labeled this on the outside surface. And the reason why I labeled it on the outside surface was because I knew the inside had to be treated. Because if I'm going to put a bottom to this, my work is going to be on this inside surface. So I knew I'd be sanding, I knew I'd be polyurethaning. And what I'm going to actually finish last on this entire box is going to be the outside. So what I did was I put them together before I took them apart. You know, that week that it took me to try to figure out how these things go apart? What I did was I labeled them. In other words, on the outside I put a C here and I put a C on this corner, so I know this corner is going to line up. Over here, I put an F here, so when I put it together this way, I could see that the F and the F go together. And that's really important. Over here, I have an A and an O, and I bet over here there's going to be an O, and there's got to be an A on that side. So I know exactly the way this is going to fit together after I sand up the inside, finish it, and clean everything up. I know it's going to fit that way. And the very last thing I'm going to do to finish is going to be take care of the outside. Today, what I'm going to do is, and I've done this before in the week, I didn't really spend a week trying to take this apart, but what I did was I popped them apart and I sanded these. And you guys know the routine, 80, 120, 220. Exactly the same as if I were to make a frame. My framing, whenever I frame, I always sand the inside part of the rabbet, because once that whole project gets glued together, I'm not going to be able to get into there and sand it. So again, this is foresight. I'm thinking ahead. If I put this rascal together, how can I get my hand on the inside here to sand it? No way. So what I was able to do is pop them apart, take each piece, put it in the vise individually so it's flat, and I sanded this. I sanded this with 80 grit, 120 grit, 220 grit, because I like it really fine. I sanded it with little 400, little 600. I did it on the inside surface of all these pieces. Of course, I didn't tell you until now. So now what I am going to do is polyurethane this. So let me go in the back and polyurethane. Whoa, back. And guess what I did? 3 coats of polyurethane on the inside surface, nice and shiny. I blew off the dust because you didn't see me, I was so fast. I blew off the dust after I sanded it, put a coat of polyurethane on, let it dry, scuff sanded it, put another coat on, let it dry, put another coat on after I scuff sanded it. So I have 3 coats that's finished. So the inside of this, I actually have it pre-done. If I want to, and I'll do this before I put everything together, is that I'm gonna scuff sand this a little bit more. Maybe I'll put 1 more coat on, or maybe, and actually feels pretty good, maybe I could just wax the inside surface. That'll be completely done. But the most important thing is I've got to put a bottom on this project. So the worst thing that you could do, how you can tell anything is done really poorly, is I take a piece of wood, put it on the bottom here, and I nail this. What we're gonna do is we're gonna try to be smart, line up a bottom to coincide with this dovetail groove, and I'll show you the right way and the wrong way to do it, so that we put the bottom in and nobody can tell that there's a bottom because we're smart, we think this through. So let's take a look at what our bottom is gonna be. What we really want it to be is a thin piece of material, and we don't want it to be solid material. We actually want a composite, which is going to be layers of plywood, layers of wood, which is plywood, and it's going to be veneered on the outside to look like our oak. This is an oak veneer plywood that happens to be 1/4 of an inch thick. This is what I'm going to have on the bottom. What I was actually toying, because I try to do things completely different, is to take actually a piece of plexiglass and put a clear bottom on this. I thought that that would be really kind of cool. I opted for the more traditional, just 1/4 inch oak plywood will work well with this oak on the inside. Maybe the next time I'll use a piece of clear plexiglass as my bottom. But the thickness is going to be 1/4 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a groove on the inside surface on all 4 of those pieces, and I have to think about exactly where it's going to go, and that's what I'm going to explain to you guys now. So this guy's going to be my bottom. I haven't cut it to the exact size. I will. I have to figure that out. Maybe you guys can help me with it. But let's take a look at a dovetail that I already cut. So here's a dovetail, and I cut it the same exact way I cut my box dovetail. The wood is just out of pine, and it's really a demonstration piece. But what I want to do is I want to cut a groove that is going to line up with the groove in here. So I have pins, which are these sides, and I have tails over here. I want the groove to line up smack dab in the middle of one of these tails. And the reason why I want to do that is because when I take this pin and put it over top of it, it's going to hide the groove. Keeping in mind, I don't want the groove to be any deeper than the depth of this dovetail. And when I pop the other one apart, you'll be able to see it. So I have to have the groove no higher than this. And what I want to do is line it up here. So I'll show you the right way to do it, and then I'll show you a common wrong way to do it where people say it doesn't really matter. So if I look at my dovetail, there is actually a groove that's cut into here, into the pin, or into the tail and into the pin. If I pop it apart, you'll notice that there's a groove here that lines up exactly even with that tail. You notice on the piece that goes along with it, here's the pin, here's the groove. And I'm going to show you how to do this. We'll cut this on the table saw. You notice it lines it up so that when I take this pin and add it to that tail, you can't see the groove on the inside. And the groove will line up to accept the plywood that I have for my bottom. So this 1/4 inch plywood should just slide right in, and it should slide into the other side and provide a nice strong bottom. Here's the wrong way to do it, where people go, it doesn't matter, I'll just go to the table saw, I'll raise the blade up to a certain height, and I'll cut it wherever. So if I look at this other side now, so this is the good side, here's the bad side. If you notice, I just randomly set the fence to whatever setting I wanted it to be. The thing that's tricky about my box is that it's almost equidistant, the same size tail on one side as it is on the other side. So that's a little bit trickier. But on this one, I made it purposely so that this is full and this is about a half a dovetail. What I did was I set this to any random width. I raised the blade up no higher than the height of that tail. If I raise it up any higher, you'll be able to see it, even through my good one. So what I did was I made my random cut. So let's see how this goes together. You could see that I could have showing a groove, which is going to be where this bottom would go into. So it's important that you take the time to figure out exactly where you want that bottom to go. It's got to line up with a pin and a tail and go no higher than that tail, okay? So you're gonna do that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do this on my good piece. I'm gonna figure out what side I want as the top side. We're gonna go to the table saw right now, and we're gonna cut that groove on the bottom so that it accepts that 1/4 inch plywood, okay? Time for a question? Let's go time for a question. Where does the groove have to line up to when you're making a dovetailed box? And the groove should line up exactly even with the pin and also the tail, which is the reason why when I put these together, I have them labeled A, B, F, O, all those different ones, so I know exactly where it's gonna go. Let's go over to the table saw. I'm gonna take my plywood, take a tape measure, pencil, and a mallet. Oh, by the way, since we're here, look at how expertly this one is done. And I hope that Johnny allows me to show you this, because this one is perfectly done. A beautiful maple bottom on his maple sides, and you don't see any groove. That's exactly what I'm after. The easier part would be, how about if we took this box and just made it mitered? Take a look at this box. This box just has the miters, and the depth of the groove, you don't see any of it because it's only cut in a certain depth. It's not cut all the way through, obviously. So the easier thing, or the easiest thing, would be to cut a miter, and then if you cut the miter, it doesn't matter where you cut the drawer bottom. I always try to show you guys the most difficult procedure and process, and then the easier one could kind of come. Let's go over there to the table saw, and we'll take everything that we need here. Little dusty in here today. So here's everything that I need. Of course I need the table saw, and I'm going to tell you, so many times in here I tell you there are two things that you want to do. Number one, raise the blade to the correct height. Number two, set the fence to the measurement you want it to be. It's going to be the same exact setting on this one. I'm going to move the fence out over here so you can actually see what I'm talking about when I say to raise the blade up no higher than that tail. I'm going to take my piece, lay it flat down on the table. I'm going to take, what do you think, one pair of glasses or two? Maybe two on this one. Although cameraman will probably tell me when to stop. What I'm going to do is use the blade height adjustment. I'm going to crank it up. And I want to make sure that the highest point, or the zenith, that's a great word. The zenith, the highest point of that blade, because you know the blade goes down, it's circular. I don't want it to come up any higher than that tail. So let's see how, that looks perfect, doesn't it? No, jackass, it's not. Look at how much higher this is than that tail. So I'm going to lower it back down. And I want to make sure, I can go a little bit less, but I actually, if I set it up right there, I think that's pretty accurate. So if I look, that point is no higher than the tail. So there's my blade setting. My blade height setting is set correctly. The next thing that I want to do is I want to figure out where I want this to go on my box. So if I take this box and put these bad boys together, let's see if I do this real quick. If there's one side that I like better, by the way, when I tap these dovetails, I've done it a couple of times already, so they're actually going in a little bit easier. What I want to do is I want to make sure my A lines up with my A. Then we'll put this side on, which is, no, I can't put this side on because then how do I get the front in? It's dovetail. So I'm going to have my two long pieces, and the last thing that has to go on is the side. Anybody could see that. You don't even have to wear two pair of glasses. Let's go with this O to this O. I lay it on top. Tap it. Now I don't want to tap this all the way down. I just want to see if I get a feel which side I like better. So there's F, here's C, tap them down. And if I feel these, they feel pretty even. It's not bad. Not bad, not bad. What I could do is I could even this out by cutting a little bit off the top. I might do that later. But this is, because this is a little chipped up over here. But what I'm gonna do is, if I look at this, this is kind of like a 3/4 depth dovetail, 3/4 wide. This is a full dovetail wide. This is gonna be my bottom. I like the way that's, see how that dovetail is bigger than this side? We're gonna have this as the bottom. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put an X on the bottom side. I wanna be consistent. When I pop these together, I know that that groove is gonna go in the same exact spot. So I'm gonna try to do this quick. I'll pop them apart. The X is gonna go on the bottom. And I will tell you, the blade height's already been set. The width of this dovetail is about a 1/2 inch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line this up probably to a setting of 1/4 inch. I'll see how that works out on the fence. Slide the fence over. Now I have to know how to read this tape on my fence. The fence setting is 1/4 inch. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lock this down and I'm gonna see if it lines up with my dovetail. Remember, the X side, no X over there, the X side should line up here. And that looks pretty good. That's not bad. Looks pretty good on this side. Let's check the sides, or the front and back. There's the X. I line it up. It's a little bit short there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slide this in just a hair, just a hair. All right, I'm gonna say that that's the setting I'm gonna go with. So with my X, consistent on every cut that I make, I'm gonna cut this and I'm gonna see if my bottom is gonna fit in. So blade height is set, fence is set. And remember about this, I'm not cutting all the way through this piece. So with that in mind, I don't have to hold what's in between the fence and the blade and push that all the way through. What I could do is I could actually hold it on the outside, no chance of it kicking back because we're not cutting all the way through the stock. So let's see if we can do this the right way. My pieces are on the side, roll up my sleeves, yuck, yuck, yuck. Safety glasses on, nobody's in the back, all set, ready to go. Fence on, X edge up against the fence. I'll use my push block. Normally I make an L with my left hand, but I can keep my hand all the way over here and just go all the way across. First thing I want to check to see is if I went past, if I went any deeper than the depth of that tail, and I didn't. The depth of that looks fine. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the other 3 pieces with the X edge up against the fence. Here's the X edge, little piece. X edge. And remember, when you guys are cutting, never doing this by yourself. You're always going to get me, an instructor. If you're doing it at home, you ask your folks. You always want to make sure that you're always taking care of safety precautions because that is the most important thing. Where's the X here? Here's my X. Got it off. Check to see. Whoa, hey, that was pretty cool. I didn't even try to do that. See how my plywood fits into that groove. And it doesn't. Why? Oh, here's another question. How thick is that blade? How thick is an average table saw blade? That's your question. The answer, 1/8 of an inch. How thick is this piece of 1/4 inch plywood? You're not that stupid, right? 1/4 inch. I can't fit 1/4 of an inch into something that I just cut 1/8 of an inch wide. So I gotta make another cut. And that's what I'm gonna do. I don't want to hit or miss this edge of this dovetail, so I'm actually gonna move it down about 1/8 of an inch, or move it into my stock. Let me see. See how this, I got it. Let's check over here. Maybe I should go in. I don't want to take that chance. Let me just slide this in just a little bit, that 1/8 of an inch. We'll make another cut and we'll see if it fits. Push block. I'm going to touch it. I'm going to pull it back because I want to see if that's a good setting. I take my piece of plywood. My piece of plywood fits in there and I have a little bit of play. So that's actually a pretty accurate setting. Make the same cut as I made before on all my 4 pieces. 1 potato. 2 potato. 3 potato. 4 potato. So there's my groove. I cut it in all 4 of my pieces. Let's just see if this fits in. Hey, it does. And I got a little bit of play in this. So now with this groove cut, I have to cough and then figure out the size that this is going to be. And this is critical. Because when I make this setting and I cut it, this whole thing is going to be able to fit together. So now I want to think. I want to use my thinking cap and understand the way this goes. This groove is exactly the depth of that tail. Got it? The width of this is going to be the width of my plywood. So if I look at this, if you figure out how this goes, this dovetail's fitting into the dovetail here. The dovetail is cut all the way down as far as that tail goes. The width of my plywood is going to be the distance from end to end on this entire piece. So if I take a measurement from here to here, that's going to give me the exact width of the plywood. Actually, in my case, because I wanted the grain running this way, it's going to be the length of the plywood. And that's something that you guys should know. This is the width distance measured across the grain. Length is the distance measured along the grain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this measurement. I'm going to take the length of this, which will give me the length of my plywood. If you look at this, it comes out to be about 5 3/8. I want a little bit of play on that. I don't want it to be too long, because if it's too long, the box doesn't go together. And remember, this groove is cut probably about 5/16 of an inch deep. So I have play in this. I'm going to probably, and I'll do it right now, I'm going to probably cut that to length to be, instead of 5 3/8, I'm going to make it about 5 5/16. So let me put on 2 pair of glasses, set the fence at 5 5/16. And I'm going to cut this to that length. Here's my piece. I have this as my machined end, but I know because I cut this on the table saw, this is also machined. On plywood, you have an A side. Usually you have an A side and a B side. What side do you like the best? Whatever side you like the best should go facing up, because the saw blade is cutting down this way and sometimes it'll chip on the back side. So I'm going to say that this is my A side, since I know the B side, they usually put the tag on it. I'm going to have this side facing up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this to actual length. Some people would refer to this as the width. It's not because the grain is running in this direction. So what I want to do is hold on to this piece. I'll put it up against here. I'm going to start to make the cut. I just want to double check that I didn't cut this short, so I want to be at about 5 5/16. Right now it's still about 5 3/8. So what I want to do is I'm going to move the fence in a hair, and I'll cut again. I took off a little bit, I could hear that. I'm going to send the board in at this setting. To do this, I have my push stick, L with my left hand, right thumb on the back edge of the board. Hold on to it with my left, push stick with my right, making sure that that stays up against the fence. I'll push it all the way through. And I'm never going to grab that scrap piece. The length of this cannot be longer than the distance from dovetail to dovetail. And if you notice, it comes out where it's just a little bit short. I mean, it could be shorter than that, but I just don't want it too long or else it's not going to go together. Now I want to figure out the width of this. And again, look at the principles. This groove goes in deeper than that pin. The pin goes from here all the way to the other side where the other one goes in. So what I really want to do is I want to cut the width of this plywood to be the length of this minus, check it out, 2 of these, what's left over. So the length of that front or back minus what's left over, because remember, that plywood's going to fit into that groove. I want to take this number and double it. How do I do that? Let me carefully measure. 2 pair of glasses. I'm going to take it from a whole number. I go to 6. It comes out to be about 1/4 of an inch. So if I go 1/4 of an inch plus 1/4 of an inch, a 1/2 inch, I'm going to subtract a 1/2 inch from the length of this. I take my tape measure, I measure, I get a measurement of about 13. 1/2 inch minus that, it's going to be 12 1/2. But remember, that groove is about 5/16 deep. So I could actually cut it a little bit less. Again, so I have a little bit of play. I want to do the same thing. So instead of cutting this at 12 1/2, I'm going to cut this maybe 12 7/16, maybe 12 3/8. Let's see. 12 3/8. 12, I'm going to go right in between 12 3/8 and 12 7/16. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip this. I know for a fact because when I cut this, I had a big 4x8 sheet of plywood and I cut it with just a handsaw. I know this edge sucks. This one's good. I'll put this edge up against the fence. A side again facing up. I'm going to cross cut this and hope that it works out. Here's the other thing. In my fence, I have a cut that somebody made into that sacrificial fence. I want to make sure that I don't squish this in there. To prevent that from happening, I think I'm going to use a miter gauge. To never be too safe. Miter gauge will keep that nice and even as I go all the way across. So people would look at this, they go, hey, you're ripping this. But in this case, the miter gauge I think is going to be safe. So again, 13. We said 12 1/2 will get me. 12 7/16, 12 3/8. I'm going to rip this piece. My right hand always goes on the silver knob of the miter gauge. Left hand in the front. I'm going to push this all the way through. The danger in this. If that piece gets picked up by the backside of those teeth, this board's shooting out. So what I always like to do is do this, because if it shoots out, it won't hit yours truly. So my board should now be fit to the size that it has to be. Now, the moment of truth. Shall we put this together? I'm going to give it a shot. And I'm going to try to do this quick. By the way, I'm going to end this video if this sucker fits. Then I'm going to polyurethane this. I'll wax these, and then the next video, I'll put everything together. But let's just see if it fits first. A to A, I put A to A. Tap this down. Now these dovetails, I actually want them tapped exactly where they're going to go. So I tap these all the way down for sure on this one. So I'm going to put that one in. Line up F to F. No. No. I have to put the front and back with one side or else that sucker isn't going to fit in. So again, we'll line up O to O. Very nice. So I'm tapping that dovetail all the way down again. Now I'll put this side on and we'll see if this thing will work. Ooh, no. Now I'm forgetting the bottom. Here is my critical piece. I'm going to take my piece, line it up into this groove, line it into this groove. I'm going to slide this down. What I want to do, and sometimes this is a little tricky to kind of squeeze it in. What I want to do is line this up into the groove, and I want to tap this all the way down. So right now it fits all the way down, and now with this piece in place, the last puzzle piece is going to be lining up my last side, F and C. So I line this up. I'm going to squeeze this together, and I'm going to tap this. And let me squeeze it together. I'm going to tap this. And whoops, came out a little bit. And I'll squeeze it and tap, squeeze it and tap, squeeze it and tap, squeeze it and tap, squeeze it and tap. So with these dovetails now, all the way down, they're nice and flat. I can feel that they're flat. Do you think that this box is going to come apart? That's the beauty of a dovetail over a miter. Because now when I put this together, and it is together, to tell you the truth, I can probably just leave it like that. I don't even know that I need to add glue in this because of how tight these miters fit. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pop these apart. I'm going to sand that bottom. I'm going to finish the bottom. I'm going to glue it all together. And I'll show you how to put glue on it when we do it. The next part that we're going to do is we'll start cleaning this all up on the outside of it. And then we'll start working on our top, which is going to be the last part. Now, the top, I know for a fact, has a lot of things that I'm thinking about that I'd like to do. Maybe some cool things that'll look pretty sharp. But I hope you enjoyed this. And again, I got lucky because I went to church. Make sure you answer those questions and understand what we're doing here before you actually go about it. Again, the miter's the easier way, the dovetail's the cooler way. You guys have a great day. See you at the next video.